back. In this video, we actually are going to be resining our art. The first thing is, or the first recommendation I have is to do it in the morning. It's bright, you're rested. The reason for that is it's very hard to see these little bubbles on your artwork, especially as the day goes on and you start to lose light. So you want a nice bright workspace. The second thing is open a window. You should be doing it by a window to get some ventilation. And if you have long hair, pull your hair back. You do not want your hair or any particles of anything falling into your resin. The next thing is you want a nice clean work area. As I discussed in the previous videos, you don't want dust or dirt in your work area. I use paper. Some artists will recommend covering your work surface in plastic. I have tried that. If you use plastic, what happens is oftentimes your resin is going to drip, which it will drip on the plastic, and then it sticks to the plastic, and what I find is the plastic gets bunched and you can't really reuse it. And instead of throwing away all that plastic, which is not good for the environment, I use paper. And what I tend to do in my studio with paper is, whether I'm painting or inking or even doing resin, is I save all of my paper and I try to recycle it. I use it for wrapping paper, I use it for bookmarks, I make different kinds of art with it. I've used it for holiday decorations. So always the goal is trying to recycle. The one key when you use paper is that if you set your resined artwork on the paper to dry and there's resin underneath the art, your art is going to stick to the paper. I have an example. I used these cans to prop my art up and the resin dripped down and I now have paper permanently resined onto these cans. This will happen to your art. So if you use paper, make sure you elevate your art. Again, I use the plastic containers as I showed you in the other video. The other thing that is imperative is to protect your canvas or your wood panel, whatever you're using, from the areas you do not want resin on it. So on this piece, I've decided I am not going to resin the sides. So I used my frog tape and I taped the sides and I also cover the back. And that's because resin can get on the back as well. I have an example of that. So I worked on this piece this week and I resined the sides, I put frog tape on the back, and somehow the resin dripped under the frog tape, and so now I have a nice chunk of resin on the back that I'm going to have to sand. You want to try to eliminate your sanding as much as possible. However, if you have to sand your art or your resin, wear your face mask because resin is toxic. The particles get in the air, they will get in your lung. It's also, as I mentioned before, a good idea to wear your face mask when you're actually doing the resin. I'm not going to be doing that in this video because I want to talk to you. The other thing I did not mention in the other video is you might want a pair of goggles. And this would be probably for when you're using the blowtorch. Whatever blowtorch you buy, read the directions. Some will tell you that they recommend the goggles to protect your eyes from the light. Okay, the next step is, like I said before, is you want to set your art on the containers. Okay, so now you have to figure out, you have to mix your resin. You have to figure out how much resin and how much hardener you want on your art. Depending on the brand of resin that you use, you will mix a certain amount depending on the size of your art. So read the instructions. On art resin, you can go onto their website and they have a resin calculator on the website. And they'll have length times width in inches. So you put in, for this particular piece, I put in 7 inches for length, and 5 inches for width. On the previous video, I think I said that this artwork was 3 by 5. Sorry about that, it's not, it's 5 by 7. So you go onto the website, you use their calculator, put in 7 by 5, and it came up with 1 ounce of solution. For art resin with 1 ounce of solution, that means 0.5 ounces of hardener and 0.5 ounces of resin. And you'll want to put that and mix that together. So as I explained on my previous video, I use a quart size painter's cup that has the measurements on the side. Unfortunately, on my cup, I don't have a measurement that goes that small because, of course, everything has to be difficult. So the lowest amount I have, the gradation on this cup is 50 milliliters. 50 milliliters is about 1.7 ounces. So I had to do some hocus pocus with my ruler. I had to measure. I had my husband help me because he's a math guy. And we figured out that we measured with the ruler. We tried to figure out where 30 milliliters would be on this cup, which would be 1 ounce. And I did that. I measured, and with a marker, I marked on my cup where 30 milliliters is 1 ounce, and from there, I figured out where the halfway point is, or 0.5 ounces, and I figured that out. If your eyes are getting glassy, don't worry about it. It's not that complicated. There's lots of online help for this. If you're doing small amounts like this, buy a container or use a measuring cup that has the smaller amounts, or go ahead and measure like I did. Okay, so now we need to mix our resin and our hardener in the cup. I have my cell phone handy because I set my timer for 3 minutes, because with art resin, you want to mix it for 3 minutes. I also, at this point, put on my plastic gloves. Remember, we're doing 0.5 ounces of hardener, 0.5 ounce of resin. So I'm going to start with the hardener. Measure, make sure I have 0.5 ounces. This really does have to be pretty exact. And then 0.5 ounces that one was perfect, of the resin. Okay, now I'm going to set my timer. I actually set my timer for 3 minutes 10 seconds. I like to go a little bit more than 3 minutes. And you stir your mixture together for 3 minutes. Okay. You're ready to pour your resin mixture onto your art. Make sure that you have your art level before you pour. And what I recommend doing is kind of doing a little bit of a spiral with the solution on your art. Just kind of keep going in circles. I try to go a little bit close to the edges. Then you take your spatula tool and you just kind of move that resin to your edges. And before you start your blowtorch, just let it set for a few seconds, maybe even up to a minute, because the resin, again, is self-leveling. And you want it to just sort of move and cover the entire surface. Okay, we're going to let that sit for about a minute. Okay, so now you want to use your blowtorch to get out the bubbles. I've let this sit for about a minute and there are several bubbles that have arisen. When you use your blowtorch, the first thing is don't use it at full capacity, which is what I did when I first started using it, and it's too hot. It will, your resin will catch fire. It's not going to blow up or anything like that, but it will ruin your piece if you put too much heat on resin. It will make a mark on your painting or on your resin. So the trick is just to use your blowtorch a few times to get used to it. This is too much. Now, what I do is I start out, I've done this enough where I know about the amount of flame that I start out with. And I go over my piece. If I can't get all the bubbles out with this amount, then I'll raise it a little bit. And I put the torch, I don't know, about a few inches from my art. I need to raise it a little bit. The other thing is keep your torch moving back and forth, kind of like you're ironing. Much better. If you let it sit on one spot for too long, again, it's going to possibly burn a hole in your resin. Okay, now what I do at this point is I look at my art and I kind of look at it from different angles as well to see, because some of these bubbles are very minute. I think on this pass, oh no, I have some on the corner, so start this up again. Okay, that looks pretty good. Oh, as you work this piece, you're going to see more and more bubbles come to the surface. That's why you need to babysit your piece. You will do this for approximately 20 to 30 minutes. In that amount of time, you can get bubbles. Also, watch for pieces of dust or lint that settle in, because at this point, you're able to take your toothpick and pick them out. I don't see anything at this point. and it's looking pretty good. So what I do is I usually have something non-art, like I don't paint, I don't do anything that's going to cause dust or put anything in the air, but I might have some writing I need to do, bills I need to pay, and I just kind of sit here for about 30 minutes and do those, and then every once in a while turn and look to make sure there aren't any other bubbles that have risen to the surface. The other thing I want to talk about is cleaning your supplies. What I do with these containers, because you can reuse them, is just take a paper towel and wipe it out. Do not use soap and water in a sink with resin. The reason for that is I did it to try to clean my first couple projects, and I ruined the sink. The resin will stick to the bottom of the sink. So unless you have a large utility sink that you don't care about, don't try to wash it in a sink. Paper towels in these plastic containers work great. They also work great on your supplies or your tools. You can reuse these if you get them cleaned off well enough. And the other tip is, if you are going to do several pieces of art at one time, sometimes I'll do 5 pieces in a morning, you have to clean your container out in between each piece of art. If you don't, the old resin and hardener from your previous painting stays in the cup and contaminates your solution. So make sure you just wipe it out in between applications. Okay, thanks for watching.